In the 1970s, British truck makers were untouchable, ruling their own highways with absolute authority, but a quiet invasion was already underway. A Swedish company named Scania didn't announce their arrival with flashy marketing. They simply handed the keys to British drivers and waited. By the time local executives realised what was happening, the war was over. Britain hadn't just been beaten, it had been completely erased. This is the story of how Sweden quietly conquered the British highway. Britain once stood at the centre of the global truck industry, manufacturing machines that moved goods across continents and defined road transport for decades. Names like Leyland and Bedford weren't just brands. They represented industrial power and national confidence. In the 1960s and early 1970s, British trucks were everywhere. Leyland Motors exported vehicles globally, while Bedford, backed by General Motors, produced trucks in huge numbers from its Luton plant. These machines were known for being simple and rugged. Because they were easy to repair and worked well in tough conditions, they held real value in markets where durability mattered more than advanced technology. At home, demand remained strong. The UK economy depended heavily on road transport, giving British manufacturers immense scale and visibility across the country. From the outside, it looked like complete control, but underneath that success, serious problems were already forming. Growth had masked inefficiency for years, and once conditions changed, those weaknesses became glaringly clear. British Leyland had grown too large and complex. It was no longer a focused company, but a fragmented collection of divisions with overlapping roles. Instead of clear strategy, there was confusion, and instead of efficiency, there was duplication of effort. Resources were spread thin across too many projects, decision-making slowed, and engineering progress began to stall. At the same time, the global trucking industry was evolving rapidly. The 1973 oil crisis pushed fuel prices to record highs, forcing operators to focus on efficiency and total operating costs rather than just the initial purchase price. Fuel usage, maintenance, and uptime became the new critical metrics. British trucks simply weren't designed for this new reality. Compared to newer European designs, their engines were inefficient, and cab comfort remained incredibly basic for long-haul drivers. Because their development cycles were too slow to keep up, they were left completely exposed. British manufacturers were reacting instead of leading, creating a performance gap that would only get worse. Then came the moment that exposed everything. In 1975, British Leyland collapsed financially and had to be nationalised to prevent a total industrial disaster. While meant to stabilise the company, nationalisation didn't fix the core problems inside the system. Investment decisions became political instead of strategic, slowing innovation even further as management focused on mere survival rather than true competition. While Britain faced these internal crises, a Swedish invasion was already underway. When the UK raised maximum truck weight limits, British engines lacked the power to handle the new speeds efficiently. Brands like Volvo initially stepped into this gap, flooding the market with highly capable, driver-focused trucks. But it was Scania that delivered the decisive blow by building a system based on absolute engineering discipline. Scania focused intensely on modular design by creating engines, gearboxes, and components that worked as a unified system across multiple truck models. They improved efficiency and slashed production costs. For operators, this modularity was a revelation. Parts could be replaced quickly without complex adjustments, drastically reducing downtime. Scania also invested heavily in fuel efficiency and built robust, well-trained service networks across its markets. Repairs could be done rapidly, guaranteeing that trucks spent less time in the shop and more time earning money on the road. This fundamentally changed the math of the transport industry. Instead of asking how much a truck cost to buy, fleets started asking how much it could earn over its lifetime. That shift heavily favoured the Swedish systems, and British manufacturers simply weren't ready for it. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, other European giants like Volvo and Mercedes-Benz followed the same path, investing heavily in research and driver-focused design. They treated trucking as a precision industry where every detail mattered, from aerodynamic fuel efficiency to reducing driver fatigue. They weren't just building machines, they were building comprehensive systems designed to deliver consistent results. They also began integrating new safety features like advanced braking systems, improved steering control, and stronger cabin structures to reduce accident risks. For fleet owners, this directly translated into fewer insurance claims and safer operations, making safety yet another measurable advantage. British manufacturers simply did not respond fast enough. Bedford is one of the clearest examples of this fatal gap. Relying heavily on older, aging designs, brand familiarity kept them alive for a time. But transport companies were evolving. As road infrastructure improved across Europe and cross-border highway routes expanded, long-haul operations demanded high-speed reliability and superior driver comfort. British trucks were decidedly unsuited for this new environment. Businesses were also becoming highly data-driven. Fleet managers tracked fuel usage and maintenance costs relentlessly, making the performance gap between brands undeniable. Bedford simply could not compete in these crucial metrics. Sales steadily declined, investment dried up as confidence dropped, and in 1986, Bedford's heavy truck operations effectively ended. This wasn't just a single company shutting down, it was the disappearance of one of the country's strongest manufacturing pillars. Leyland continued to struggle during this period. Despite multiple restructuring attempts, they failed to restore their competitiveness. In 1987, Leyland merged with the Dutch company DAF Trucks, officially marking the end of an independent British truck industry. From that point forward, Britain was no longer leading the sector. It was merely a consumer in a broader European market dominated by brands like Scania. Scania's trucks had become globally recognised for their long-term durability. Fleet operators realised that a higher upfront purchase price was easily justified by significantly lower running costs over the vehicle's lifespan. British manufacturers, who had relied for decades on competing on upfront price, lacked the innovation and system-level thinking required to match this new standard. By the time they realised what was happening, they were hopelessly behind. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, foreign manufacturers rapidly expanded their presence in the UK. At first, the change was gradual, as a few fleets tested Scania trucks alongside their British counterparts. But the results were swift and decisive. Fuel savings improved margins, unmatched reliability slashed operational downtime, and drivers vastly preferred the modern cabs. Fleet by fleet, companies switched. When Leyland DAF entered bankruptcy in 1993, the last remaining illusion of a strong British-led industry shattered completely. The market had moved on. Today, the UK roads tell the real story. Scania is one of the leading heavy truck brands in the United Kingdom, competing at the highest level and continuing to grow. The trucks moving Britain's economy are no longer British. They are part of a global system led by European companies that simply adapted faster. But to fully understand the absolute scale of this shift, you have to look past the corporate headlines and step inside the transport companies themselves. The real transformation happened in daily operations. By the late 1980s, fleet managers were running direct comparisons. British trucks and Scania trucks were being tested under the exact same conditions. The results were consistent and difficult to ignore. Over time, Scania simply performed better. Fuel economy was one of the starkest differences. Even marginal improvements created massive savings over long distances. Multiplied across entire fleets, the financial impact was huge. This factor alone began shifting buying decisions. Maintenance told a similar story. British trucks required more frequent repairs, and parts were not always readily available. Downtime increased and profits dropped. Scania's modular system virtually eliminated these problems. Parts could be swapped quickly and easily. Their service networks supported rapid repairs, meaning trucks returned to the road faster. Driver preference also emerged as a critical factor. Scania cabs offered superior comfort and visibility. Long hours behind the wheel became less exhausting, which directly improved both safety and productivity. companies quickly noticed the ripple effect. Better trucks helped retain experienced drivers. Higher retention meant lower hiring and training costs, improving efficiency across the entire operation. This fundamentally changed the decision-making process inside these companies. It was no longer just about the upfront cost or raw performance. It was about how the entire system worked together. And Scania delivered that system. At the same time, another major shift was taking place. Leasing and service contracts were becoming the industry standard. Companies wanted predictable costs and guaranteed reliable performance. This required a different kind of manufacturer. Scania was ready for this model, offering structured service plans and long-term support. Costs became predictable, giving companies confidence. British manufacturers were slower to adapt. They remained focused on simply selling trucks, while Scania focused on delivering long-term performance. That philosophical difference redefined the market. By the 1990s, the transition was complete. Companies that resisted the change struggled to compete as higher operational costs ate into their profitability. Many were forced to upgrade just to survive. And when they did upgrade, they chose what worked. This is how an industry transition becomes permanent. It is driven by practical, daily decisions, not sudden events. Each choice moved the market further away from British trucks. Each choice strengthened companies like Scania. Momentum built slowly but steadily, and once it peaked, it could not be reversed. But there was another catalyst that accelerated this shift. European regulations began tightening around emissions, safety and efficiency. Manufacturers had to meet higher standards to remain competitive. Scania adapted quickly, investing heavily in cleaner, more advanced diesel technology. British manufacturers struggled to keep pace with these regulatory hurdles. Updating older platforms required major capital investments they simply could not afford. As a result, their trucks became less competitive, not just economically, but legally in certain markets, widening the gap even further. Simultaneously, the logistics industry itself was evolving. Delivery schedules became tighter and highly time-sensitive. Just-in-time supply chains demanded reliability with almost zero margin for error. A truck breaking down was no longer just an inconvenience. It was a severe financial risk. Scania's reliability fit perfectly into this modern system. Operators could depend on consistent performance, day in and day out. This made logistical planning easier and drastically reduced unexpected losses. Confidence in the equipment became a core competitive advantage. There was also a growing trend toward fleet standardization. Companies preferred operating trucks from a single brand to simplify maintenance and streamline driver training. Once Scania proved itself within a fleet, expansion was natural. One purchase turned into 10, and 10 turned into hundreds. This created long-term brand lock-in, service familiarity, parts compatibility, and positive driver experiences all reinforced the decision to stay. Switching away became harder and harder. British manufacturers, already losing significant ground, found it almost impossible to win those customers back. Finance models evolved right alongside the engineering. Banks and leasing companies favoured brands with strong resale values and proven reliability records. Because Scania trucks held their value better in the used market, they were easier to finance and less risky to own. This financial advantage was just as critical as the mechanical one. Lower depreciation reduced the total cost of ownership, giving Scania yet another edge that British manufacturers could not match. That is the full story. It isn't just about how Scania rose, but how the entire system around it supported that rise, and how Britain, step by step, lost its dominant position. Britain once built trucks for the world. Today, it buys them, and the name on many of those trucks explains everything: Scania.